This is Dementia Empowered, the podcast helping family caregivers navigate dementia care, overcome legal and financial challenges, and make confident decisions to support their loved ones. I'm your host, Patrick Cawley. Let's get started. If you're caring for someone with dementia, you may be wondering whether you are doomed to have the same fate. It's just a matter of time. Or you might be asking whether there's anything you could be doing to improve the symptoms, perhaps reverse the symptoms of dementia that your loved one is experiencing. If you're asking these questions, this show is for you. Keep listening and you will hear how cognitive decline comes from many factors, maybe over the course of many years. And if you yourself are giving attention to these factors, you may be greatly reducing your own risk of experiencing dementia in your lifetime. And keep listening and you'll find out that for your loved one who already is living with dementia, it may be reasonable to pay attention to certain factors and try certain interventions so that you have them cognitively improving while they are under your care. My guest today is Eric Collett, the principal and CEO of A Mind for All Seasons, an innovative company helping people across the United States to optimize their cognitive function and improve the symptoms of post-concussive disorder or dementia or brain fog, anxiety, depression, a range of brain-related conditions. Eric is a nationally recognized speaker and expert on dementia, both the art and the science, and I'm thrilled to have him on Dementia Empowered. Eric, thank you for sharing your time with us.
Oh, my pleasure. It's great to be with you, Patrick.
Well, and I mentioned both the art and the science. That's a phrase you have used, and I'd love to have you come back at a later time to talk about the art. I know you have the vital 5 pillars of effective interaction when it comes to dementia care. It's just a goldmine of information for listeners, but because there's so much that people could learn from you, let's be intentional about this and focus on the science today. But I want to start with a bold statement that I've heard you make and some others, and it might strike some as controversial. The statement is, dementia is optional. Talk about that a little bit.
Yes, you're right that this is really the first generation of humans for whom most dementia cases become a choice. We now understand a lot more about the root cause factors that over decades of time lead to cognitive decline. And we've learned that brain health is not about one thing. It's about a lot of different factors, which is why it's really difficult to make a drug that will cure some of the different types of dementia, whether it's Alzheimer's or Parkinson's dementia or anything else on the list. Difficult to make one drug that does like 50 different things. But when you understand what many of those different factors are and you stack interventions together, that's when it's a total game changer. And the best way to treat Alzheimer's disease is not to get it in the first place. So if you understand the factors that are contributing and you address those early, it really changes the trajectory. So it's a message of hope to the world that we can choose, at least to a great extent, the path that we're on.
Well, if there's one thing this show is about, it's the opposite of the doom and gloom message that you get so often when it comes to dementia. I really do believe in empowering people, whether that's legal issues or financial issues or care skills. And I think your message is definitely an empowering one. But let's talk about these factors, because what you take members of A Mind for All Seasons through is a protocol, but it's going to be pretty tailored to that individual. You do some detective work first to figure out what might be going on with this person that needs some attention. So talk about what the process looks like at A Mind for All Seasons. What are you looking for the person who they're the child of the person with dementia and they just want to be looking at their own brain health?
Excellent. One of the things that people need to understand as an overview of the work that we do and how we help people improve their brain health is that whether we're talking about Alzheimer's disease or post-concussion syndrome or brain fog or anxiety or depression, largely you have a problem of energetics. You're not producing sufficient energy at the cellular level. So let me give you a simple analogy of how the cellular engine works, and then we'll break out things that we can look at and detective work that can be done. I think just the framework, though, gives people an actionable kind of way of thinking about this. You're probably familiar, Patrick, with steamships that crisscrossed the waters of the world back in the 1800s, early 1900s. And on
Sure.
those steamships, there was an engine room and there was a coal-fired furnace. And you'd see a guy that was shoveling coal into that furnace. And that guy needed three things to be able to do his job. You have to keep him well hydrated because that's a hot environment. And if he sweats enough, he's going to just drop. You have to feed him periodically. And you actually have to have a ventilation system that's working properly because if that furnace backs up, he's going to get carbon monoxide poisoning and drop dead. Now, the thing that actually powers the ventilation system is the coal-fired furnace itself. You've got to heat the water to make the steam to run the ship. So if you're not feeding the guy and he's slowing down on the job, then maybe the ventilation system doesn't work so well. And there's a little synergy in all of that. Now think about the engine room as like every cell in the body. And the guy shoveling coal in that furnace together are mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, energy producers. They need the same three conditions. We have to be properly hydrated to make energy in the body, and that includes not just water, but electrolytes as well. We also have to get fuel into the cell. So in a condition like Alzheimer's disease, that in medical circles is often called type 3 diabetes or diabetes of the brain, in about 80% of cases, you have a problem getting glucose into the cell to get converted to energy. It's like you're not feeding the guy shoveling the coal in and he can't do his job. As far as the exhaust, well, just running the cellular engine produces exhaust. Technically, it's called reactive oxygen species, or think of it as oxidative stress, if you've ever heard that term. And the thing that clears that is antioxidants. So there's this overall framework that when someone is presenting with a brain-related problem, you might sum it up as saying they have mitochondrial dysfunction. So let me just pause there. Do you have thoughts or questions about that?
Well, no, I love it because this is really still, I don't know, maybe a relatively new take on everything, where before all anybody could talk about, if it's Alzheimer's, is the plaques and tangles in the brain. And do we attack those with medications? Do we not? But you're talking about a metabolic function of the body. Everything is and this is, I think, is the same people, experts like you, who are talking about metabolic function, are saying really the same thing about mental health issues as well. Dementia, anxiety. If you're experiencing brain fog, it could be the guy shoveling the coal into the cell is not adequately fed or hydrated, or all of these factors might just be off. It might be fixable. So I love the analogy. We're talking about metabolic function. It's all a metabolic issue.
Yeah, exactly. Dr. Chris Palmer, who's a psychiatrist that's been practicing at Harvard Medical School and McLean Hospital for about 25 years, published a book a few years ago called Brain Energy, in which he emphatically states that all mental health problems are a metabolic problem. And when people hear metabolism, they often think weight gain, weight loss. I look at a box of Krispy Kremes and I gain 10 pounds, I think. And metabolism really is about how the cell is functioning. And I agree with his view that in all mental health cases, and you could even say in all dementia cases, in one way or another, there is a metabolic problem. So if we can understand different root cause factors that lead to metabolic dysfunction and we do something about those in a personalized way, people get better results. So you okay if we talk about some action items, some things that people can pay attention to that make a difference for their loved ones and for themselves?
I'd be happy to talk about that. And I don't think it's necessary, but I'll say it anyway, that I have no financial stake in A Mind for All Seasons or any other guest on my show, but I am in fact a paying member. So I've been through what Eric is describing here. And I'd like you to lay out what the process might look like to take action, to look at where the guy shoveling the coal in their body is not getting what he needs or what the engine needs.
I'm going to break it down into three buckets, three broad categories to pay attention to. So category number one are lifestyle factors, things that influence metabolism. These are things like exercise and sleep and stress management, diet. What we're eating certainly has an impact on metabolism. Stress management, brain training. These kinds of things really influence how our brain and our body function. So, for example, if you look at the top killers, heart disease and type 2 diabetes and Alzheimer's disease, and if you look at the obesity epidemic, what all of those conditions have in common is resistance to insulin signaling. They're a metabolic problem, and they're all risk factors for one another. If you have heart disease, you're actually a lot more likely to have Alzheimer's disease and vice versa.
For a stroke or any number of things.
Because one of the things that just destroys our bodies is chronically elevated blood sugar. I spent 16 years running assisted living and memory care communities, and I saw people and took care of people who lost limbs because they had chronically elevated blood sugar. So if we're thoughtful about improving insulin sensitivity by not provoking such an insulin response through the things that we're eating, we do better. So where do you start with something like that? Well, number one, don't eat ultra-processed food because it's generally devoid of real nutrition, and it's loaded with things like high fructose corn syrup that is wrecking the livers of this country. Back in the 1970s, virtually nobody had fatty liver disease except alcoholics. Doctors basically never saw it. And nowadays, I read in a book from Dr. Robert Lustig, who's an endocrinologist, that nowadays we're seeing somewhere around 30 to 40% of Americans that have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Well, why is that? Well, fructose is processed exclusively in the liver. And if you're concentrating fructose and getting high amounts of it, you wreck the liver.
I heard it the other day with a physician who said she was seeing 13-year-olds with type 2 diabetes, which you only get from just punishing your body with lots and lots of refined sugar, high fructose corn syrup. Yeah, that's astonishing.
Exactly. And why is type 2 diabetes so difficult for people to wrap their heads around and know what to do about it? Why has it gone up over 30% in the last couple of decades? I think part of it is the framing with type 2 diabetes and type 3 diabetes, Alzheimer's disease. The framing is, oh, this is a problem of excess blood sugar. It's actually not. It's more a problem of excess insulin. Because every time you eat sugar, your pancreas has to produce insulin to deliver that sugar to the cell. It's like we got to feed the guy shoveling the coal in, and that's kind of the spout to pour the gas in the tank, so to speak. And if you eat high levels of sugar, then your body has to produce higher and higher levels of insulin. And it usually takes years, sometimes more than a decade, for someone to become a type 2 diabetic. But it happens by eating lots and lots of sugar, and then the pancreas has to work harder and harder all the time. And then eventually the pancreas just says, I give up. I can't do this anymore. So you could see something like type 2 diabetes 10 years off by just checking a fasting insulin level, looking at A1C, how much sugar is bound to a red blood cell, and not getting so hung up on fasting blood sugar, which is actually a late stage thing to change. So a little bit of blood work in that regard goes a long way. But again, what is actionable? Well, cut out ultra-processed food. Start by eating real food. And if you have a problem with resistance to insulin signaling, then quit doing the things that are provoking an insulin response so that your body becomes more and more sensitive to it. And there's nuance to that. That's why there's coaching and guidance and blood work and help for those sorts of things. But just eating real food would make a difference for a lot of people.
Right. And when I started with you, there was a little bit of talk to me about that and how much are you sleeping? What are you eating? But then the blood work doesn't lie. The numbers are there. And I think one of the things is what you just mentioned. What's the A1C level? What is the fasting insulin level? You're looking at that, and now we know why.
Yeah. So maybe I'll back up and give just another paradigm to think about brain health for ourselves and for others around us. Think of optimal brain health as like a boat that's just skimming across the water effortlessly. Things are really good. We're cutting through the water just fine. If your brain health is declining, it's like you're taking on water. And there's almost never just one hole in the boat. There's often 15 to 30 things that are going on, and most of those things are measurable. Bucket one is lifestyle factors. You cannot medicate or supplement your way out of poor sleep. And sleep is when the clean cycle of the brain runs. We could take a totally deep dive on that because there's very recent research on exactly what's going on that allows the brain to flush out misfolded proteins and cellular waste and debris and so forth. So if we're not optimizing sleep, that's a really big hole in the boat. And then there are the other lifestyle factors that I mentioned. But we've started talking a little bit more about blood work, which is kind of the second bucket. And included on the list would be metabolic markers, like we were discussing. Nutrients matter. If you don't have good levels of B vitamins, you get a lot more brain shrinkage over time. If you don't have the right ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids, it dramatically affects your brain because about 30% of the structure of a brain cell is omega-3 fatty acids. And here in the United States, we don't eat a lot of fatty fish. So we've done blood work in thousands of people across the country, and most people have 10 to 20 times more omega-6 than omega-3. That's a problem for a lot of people. Hormones, that's a huge factor. Most people don't realize just how many hormones there are in the body. There are hundreds of hormones. There are over 35 hormones in the brain that are very active. Most people don't realize that sex hormones like testosterone and estradiol and progesterone are not just about reproduction, they're also very neurologically active. And one of the reasons that 2 out of 3 Alzheimer's patients are women is likely because the longer you live after menopause, the more your hormone levels are crashing, the more you just don't have the hormonal support to keep the brain functioning the way that it needs to. We've seen some phenomenal results in people, even living in skilled nursing and assisted living facilities, by doing a little bit of modest hormone replacement just to give people enough that their brains can function really well. You could add to the list as far as other blood work that you'd look at, but then you start delving into the third bucket, which is dealing with neurotoxic substances and exposure to things like heavy metals, mold, Lyme, biological pathogens, industrial pollutants. So those are the 3 buckets: lifestyle, basic blood work, and then neurotoxic substances. And not everybody has to go to bucket 3. But when we identify the holes in the boat, when we measure them and give someone an actionable plan that says, hey, out of 50 or so different things, you've got these 15 issues going on. Here's exactly what we recommend that you do about them. When they take action on those things, we see really exciting, measurable results, both for people like you and me who are trying to keep our brains sharp and prevent decline, and in people who already have serious disease.
Well, let's talk about the people who already have it, because I think we've given some measure of hope and empowerment to the family caregiver who might be listening to this show and wondering about their own future. There are things to look at, these buckets. Where might you be deficient? It's come down to a self-assessment of your sleep or sleep quality. It's going to look at nutrition and what shows up in your blood. Are you low in B vitamins, D vitamins? What do your hormones look like? That's all extremely important. But how has this worked? And I know you ran these assisted living facilities. You've encountered thousands of families. I'm a little guarded here about telling anyone there's a cure for dementia. Is there room for improvement of cognitive function? How do you navigate that question for the person who already is living with a dementia diagnosis?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I want to state emphatically out of the gate, we don't have a cure, but we can make a bigger difference than we've ever been able to make. And things get better and better all the time. So what does that look like? Statistically, and there have been some pilot trials and some studies of things, and then we have our own data, what we do at A Mind for All Seasons and what other practitioners are doing in the field. And what we see is that for someone already living with a dementing illness, somewhere between 75 and about 84% of the time, we can make a real measurable difference. What does that look like? Recent case study, about Oh, a month ago, we were contacted by one of our partners. They operate a skilled nursing and memory care facility on the East Coast. They had a female resident who they reported was up most of the night, trying to go in other residents' rooms, literally breaking doorknobs off, pounding on the door, slapping at staff, and they didn't know what to do. And we knew that she was very hormonally deficient just based on her age and the fact she wasn't doing any sort of hormone replacement. Progesterone binds to GABA receptors, and so it has a very calming effect, and it can be a powerful tool in helping people sleep. And it's natural. It doesn't come with all the side effects of many of the psychotropic drugs that get used in situations like this. So instead of sending her down the road of, hey, let's talk to a psychiatrist and let's get you on board with some of these drugs that actually have a warning that they increase your risk of death and they have some nasty side effects, our medical director recommended to her primary care provider that we start a really conservative dose of a bioidentical progesterone. That's actually all that we did. They were only ready to take one little step. So we measured that keyhole in the boat. Fast forward 2 weeks later, and I got an email from the lady that runs that memory care, and she said, I can't believe how different things are. This woman still stays up a little bit later than most residents, but she is not trying to go in their rooms. She goes to sleep and gets a full night's sleep. She's participating in activities. She's very pleasant. And instead of slapping at people, she's hugging people. What's next? What else could we look at? And we started going down the road. Well, let's check her omega-6/3 ratio. And we're just little by little working on this. Now, she still needs full-time care. But for most people, what I just described is a massive victory. And it's going to add so much quality to her life and, frankly, to the people who are serving her. That's not an isolated episode. I could talk all day about those kinds of experiences by just looking at a root cause issue.
So I think that probably is a real wake-up call to a lot of people who are caring for a loved one at home. And there are care skills, that's the art side of all of this, but they're absolutely befuddled by the behaviors sometimes. And now they're seeing what could be behind it and what could be an intervention. What are some of the other stories that you have to give maybe some context of the difference between a cure and improving having their loved one present with them, at least for longer than they would have? And I imagine you've worked with people across the age range from, let's say, 60s to 90s, and you've seen results. So what other stories might clue people in to what is possible here?
I'll tell you a couple to get a kind of range of ages. So we worked with a 66-year-old man, actually still very much a client. He came to us a few years ago when he was 66 years old. He had been forced into an early retirement. And earlier in life, he had gone to a psychologist and was diagnosed as a literal genius. And then in his late 50s, he lost his job. He was a highly paid, highly skilled engineer, super talented guy who lost a job because he was failing on the job. He was not performing well. He was forgetting all kinds of things. So he went to a psychiatrist who looked at him and said, this is early onset Alzheimer's disease. Well, he wanted another opinion, went to a neurologist who said, yeah, I agree. This is early onset Alzheimer's disease. Went to a third neurologist. And when that doctor said, yep, this is early onset Alzheimer's, he was younger than age 65, so early onset. And this guy said, what am I supposed to do about this? And the doctor said, well, there's not much that you can do. And I just suggest that you get yourself a really good attorney, like Patrick, right? Get yourself a good attorney and make sure that your wife has access to your assets because you might not know who she is in a few years. And he was angry. And understandably, but he had a family member that knew about A Mind for All Seasons, referred him, and we started working with him. His baseline cognitive test showed that his composite memory score, all the different memory tests that we did as a composite score, was in the 8th percentile. Now, this guy was a genius, but he certainly was not showing up like a genius. His brain was not performing at that level. Well, from July to December, he improved from the 8th percentile to the 91st percentile in his memory.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. And
But that's
he
not
had
a
a
lot of time
dream
either.
No, it's not. His goal in life was to get to retirement and go on a mission trip with his wife for their church. And he was actually able to fulfill that goal because he was functioning so much better. Now, was he cured? Definitely not. In fact, he fell off the wagon with his program about a year into it. He quit eating so cleanly. Diet was a huge factor for this guy. He had a lot of problems with insulin resistance, and by keeping his sugars lower, he just performed a lot better. He fell off the wagon and he started to get worse again. And he and his wife reached out to us and said, okay, we got to get more serious with this. We need your help because he's backsliding. Well, we watched him come back from that, and he has to maintain these things. He has to address the hormonal picture long-term. He has to address his diet. He has to stay physically active. He has to optimize his sleep. He has to deal with his nutrient levels appropriately. And in doing so now, he's maintaining beautifully and then just slowly making little gains. He's going to have this the rest of his life, but it's empowering him to live a different kind of a life.
And I love that you're emphasizing that there may be multiple holes in the boat. Yes, there may be ways to plug those holes, but you have to keep them plugged, and it takes persistence. And really, that's going back to what we started with, this being a metabolic condition. Even if your goal with controlling or avoiding insulin resistance is to lose weight, that's going to take persistence. If you stop eating the whole foods, natural foods, and you start going back to pizza and Pringles, you're going to gain weight again because the insulin is going to go right back to it. And so it makes sense that persistence and consistency matters here as well.
Exactly right. And one of the challenges of the human condition is drift. Part of the magic of what we do, in my opinion, is coaching. We've built a really supportive community of people, and we're all striving to do this together. My wife was in our brain therapy studio today using equipment early in the morning before work started. I do these things consistently. I get my blood drawn on a regular basis so that I can live this way because I found that it's a better way to live.
So once the initial issues are figured out, I think you're talking about some measure of accountability and keeping your head in the game. And even just with A Mind for All Seasons, where there are weekly master classes or there's office hours, you can be checking in with not only the people who are in the know and can answer questions, but you have access to community discussion. That's the kind of coaching that will keep you on the path. Once you figure out what holes in the boat need to be plugged and you want to keep them plugged, that's what will keep you there. So that's what I love. And I want to make sure that people understand where to find more information about this, Eric. And the website is amindforallseasons.com, and /join is how you're going to get in the front door. So amindforallseasons.com/join. What are people going to find there, or what should they be anticipating with the website, Eric?
Well, Patrick, if they go to that URL, amindforallseasons.com/join, that is the access point to become a member of A Mind for All Seasons. And we charge $25 a month to be a member and to have access to online office hours where you can come and ask questions directly of me, of our medical director, of Matt, our nurse. You can interact with other people in the community. You can participate in weekly master classes. There's lots of recorded content. So if there are things that you're working on and you want extra insight and support, chances are you're going to find content related to that thing because there's hundreds of hours of stuff and it's searchable. So for listeners of your podcast, if you go to mindforallseasons.com/join and type in the word empower at the checkout, then you get 30 days free trial of the membership site, and you can have access to everything that's there, all the bells and whistles. And if you want to go deeper and you actually want to get blood work and you want a personalized treatment summary, you can access that resource right on the website. So we'd love to have anybody come in as new members, bring your questions and concerns, and talk about personalized medicine.
And thank you for having the Empower discount code, because people really should poke around and really make the most of that 30-day free trial, because there's no way you'll be able to scour through all of the information, I know from experience, in 30 days, but it'll give you a very good sense of how people are discussing these metabolic issues, these nutrient issues, these lifestyle factors like sleep and stress reduction. It all adds up. And if you do it consistently, I'd love for people to have a better future of hope that you're describing, Eric.
Thank you, Patrick. There's no shortage of information out there, but one of the challenges is too much information. And we've tried to whittle things down on the membership site to what people actually need to know to get real results in their own lives. And when you couple that information with the ability to speak to someone who has expertise in this and can make direct recommendations, then people are empowered to take control of their own bodies. Nobody will ever care as much about your body as you do. And I think people want to know more about that. They want to have help with it.
Thanks so much, Eric, for coming on the show and sharing everything that A Mind for All Seasons is up to.
Thank you, Patrick. It's a privilege to be here.
I cover a lot of topics on Dementia Empowered: legal concepts, navigating the healthcare system, financial challenges. These concepts are all connected in dementia care. Coming soon to my website, KeystoneElderLaw.com, is a self-guided course to help you put it all together in one place. Anytime and anywhere, I can guide you through a number of sessions to learn the care skills of dementia. If your family would benefit from coaching, send me an email at info@KeystoneElderLaw.com.